Sometimes a single word can change the destiny of 3 generations. For Valerie Herrera, a 28-year-old woman who served tables in the most exclusive restaurant in New York City, that word would be beautiful. For Hope Montgomery, a 76-year-old woman who had built a textile empire on the ashes of a broken heart, it would be the beginning of the end of 5 decades of desperate searching. This is not a story about money. It is the story of how a small sapphire brooch, passed down from generation to generation, would become the key to opening the most painful door of the past. What city are you watching this video from, and what time is it? By the way, if you're enjoying my videos, I'd be so happy if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video. The golden lights of the Imperial Room created an atmosphere of opulence that Valerie knew better than her own breath. Every crystal of the chandelier, every fold of the linen tablecloth, every note of the piano music that floated gently through the air. It was all part of a world she served, but to which she would never belong. It was 9 p.m. on an October Tuesday, and the restaurant was at its most elegant. The diners, dressed in suits that cost more than Valerie's annual rent, chatted quietly about million-dollar deals and vacations in the Hamptons. Valerie moved between the tables with the studied grace of someone who has perfected the art of being invisible. Her black uniform, impeccably pressed, contrasted with her tan skin and brown eyes, which held secrets of sleepless nights and medical bills that grew like weeds. "Table 7 needs more water," murmured Sofia Rivera, her co-worker and only true friend, as she rushed past with a tray of crystal glasses. "And be careful, the lady at table 2 is in a terrible mood. She's already sent the wine back twice," Valerie nodded, filling the crystal water pitcher. Her hands, despite the accumulated fatigue of 2 jobs and nights caring for her sick mother, remained steady. She had learned that in this world of extreme luxury, any tremor was noticed, any mistake remembered. She headed toward table 7, where a middle-aged couple was quietly discussing the purchase of a house in the Hamptons, as if deciding what to have for dinner. As she approached, she noticed a third person at the table who hadn't been there when she served the appetizers. The newcomer was impressive, not through ostentation, but with an elegance that seemed to emanate from her bones. She had silver hair perfectly styled in a low bun and wore a navy blue suit that screamed high fashion without needing labels. Her hands, decorated with discreet but clearly valuable rings, rested on the table with the confidence of someone who had never known economic insecurity. But it was her eyes that caught Valerie's attention. They were the color of the sea in a storm, gray with blue flecks, and in them was a depth of pain that no amount of money could buy or cure. "Excuse me," Valerie said in her softest professional voice. "May I pour you some water?" The older woman looked up, and for a moment their gazes met. Valerie felt an inexplicable chill, as if those eyes were searching her face for something, some answer to a question that had never been asked. "Yes, thank you," the woman replied. Her voice had a refined accent, the kind acquired in Swiss boarding schools and perfected in Parisian salons. As Valerie filled the crystal glass, she couldn't help but notice the brooch adorning the lapel of the woman's suit. It was an extraordinary piece, a white gold oval inlaid with blue sapphires forming a delicate floral pattern. In the center, a small but perfectly cut diamond captured and reflected the golden light of the restaurant. The brooch was familiar, very familiar. The words left her mouth before she could stop them, driven by a sudden nostalgia she didn't fully understand. What a beautiful brooch. My mother, she had one exactly like it. The silence that followed was so profound that Valerie could hear the tinkling of cutlery at nearby tables, the distant murmur of conversations about corporate mergers, even her own heart beating faster than normal. The older woman had gone completely still. Her face, which until that moment had shown the serene composure of high society, transformed into a mask of shock so intense, she seemed to have turned to stone. The water glass slipped from her fingers. The crystal shattered against the marble floor, with a sound that cut through the air like a gunshot. The water spread into an irregular pool that reflected the golden ceiling lights, and the brilliant fragments of glass scattered like small, broken diamonds. But no one paid attention to the mess on the floor. All attention was fixed on the older woman, because Hope Montgomery, the matriarch of one of America's most powerful families, the woman who had faced financial crises, labor strikes, and the death of her husband without shedding a single tear in public, was crying. It wasn't delicate, controlled crying. These were tears gushing from a place so deep in her soul they seemed to have a life of their own. They ran down her carefully made-up cheeks, ruining the artistic work of her personal esthetician, and fell onto her silk suit like small pearls of pure pain. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table, her lips moving without a sound, as if trying to form words that had been buried for 50 years. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Valerie immediately knelt beside the woman, completely forgetting the restaurant's protocol. Her caregiver's instinct, forged by years of attending to her sick mother, activated automatically. The other diners at the table looked at her with a mixture of concern and bewilderment. The man, who wore a watch that probably cost more than Valerie's annual salary, leaned toward the woman. "Hope, what's wrong? Do I need to call a doctor?" Hope. The name echoed in Valerie's mind. Hope Montgomery. She had read that name in the business pages of the newspaper. She had seen her photograph in high society magazines. She was one of the richest and most influential women in America, owner of a textile empire that employed thousands and had factories on 3 continents, and now she was crying over a casual comment about a brooch. "Your mother," Hope managed to whisper, her voice as broken as trampled glass. "What was your mother's brooch like?" The question was so intense, so laden with a barely contained desperation, that Valerie felt as if she were on the edge of a cliff, not knowing whether to step forward or retreat to safety. It was very similar to yours," she replied cautiously, noticing that all eyes from the nearby tables were now fixed on them. White gold with blue sapphires and a diamond in the center. "My mother always said it had belonged to her family for generations." Hope closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, Valerie saw something in them that frightened her. Recognition. "What is your mother's name?" The question came out as an urgent whisper. "Alexandra," Valerie replied, feeling increasingly confused. "Alexandra Herrera. Well, now it's Alexandra Herrera, but I think her maiden name was different. She never told me exactly." Hope's reaction was immediate and devastating. A choked sob escaped her throat, a sound so full of pain that several people at nearby tables stopped eating to stare. She brought her hands to her face, and her shoulders began to shake with silent sobs that seemed to come from the depths of her being. 50 years, she murmured through her tears, her voice barely audible. 50 years looking for her. The restaurant had fallen into an expectant silence. The diners pretended not to look, but Valerie could feel the weight of dozens of curious eyes. The maitre d', a distinguished man named Joaquin, was approaching discreetly with an expression of professional concern. "Ma'am," Valerie spoke softly, taking a linen napkin from the table and offering it to Hope. "Would you like me to help you get some fresh air? Perhaps you need a moment." Hope looked up, and this time there was no doubt in her eyes. She studied Valerie's face with an intensity that made her feel as if she were being examined under a microscope. "Your eyes," Hope whispered. "You have her eyes. The same shape of the nose, the same—" She stopped, as if the words were too dangerous to be spoken aloud. "The same what?" Valerie heard herself ask, though a part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "The same expression my daughter had when she was young." The words fell between them like stones thrown into a calm pond, creating ripples that spread outward, disturbing everything they touched. Valerie felt dizzy. The elegant dining room of the Imperial Room seemed to tilt slightly, as if the floor had lost its solidity. She gripped the back of a chair to keep her balance. Your daughter?" she repeated slowly. "Alexandra," Hope said, and the name left her lips like a prayer she'd been reciting for half a century. "My daughter, Alexandra, disappeared 50 years ago. She was 22. She fell in love with a man we didn't approve of. One night we had a terrible argument, and the next day she was gone. She took only one suitcase, and the brooch I had given her for her 18th birthday." Valerie's head was spinning. Her mother, Alexandra, had always been very secretive about her past. She had raised Valerie alone, working low-paying jobs, living in small apartments in the Bronx. She always said her family had died in an accident when she was young, that she had no one else in the world except Valerie. But there were things that had never quite added up. The brooch, for example, which seemed far too valuable for a woman who cleaned offices to have afforded. The way her mother sometimes looked toward the Upper East Side when they walked through Manhattan, with an expression of nostalgia mixed with pain. The times Valerie had found her crying for no apparent reason, especially around Christmas. "This is impossible," Valerie murmured, but even as she said the words, a part of her was beginning to fit together, the pieces of a puzzle she never knew existed. Hope managed to compose herself enough to search her handbag, an elegant leather clutch that probably cost more than Valerie's used car. She pulled out a small yellowish photograph, protected by a plastic sleeve that showed the marks of time and constant handling. "This is my Alexandra," she said, holding out the photograph with slightly trembling hands. She was 22 when this was taken, just before she disappeared. Valerie took the photograph, and the world stopped. The young woman in the picture was undoubtedly her mother, but a version of her mother she had never known. It was Alexandra, but not the tired, prematurely aged Alexandra who had raised Valerie by working double shifts. This was Alexandra young, vibrant, dressed in expensive clothes, posing in what looked like the garden of a mansion. Her eyes sparkled with a confidence and joy that Valerie had never seen in the woman she knew as her mother. But it wasn't just her youth that made her different. It was evident that this Alexandra had belonged to a world of privilege and luxury. Her dress was silk, her jewelry was real, her hairstyle was clearly the work of professionals. She was the picture of a young heiress, from a wealthy family, not the working-class woman who had raised Valerie. "Oh my God," Valerie whispered, the words coming out as a choked breath. "Is it her?" Hope asked with an urgency that cut the air. "Is it your mother?" Valerie couldn't answer immediately. The photograph trembled in her hands as her mind struggled to process the magnitude of what she was discovering. Everything she thought she knew about her family, about her history, about her place in the world, was crumbling and rebuilding itself at the same time. "Yes," she finally managed to say, her voice no louder than a whisper. "It's her. It's my mother." The sound that escaped Hope's throat was primitive, like the sound a wounded animal would make. She covered her mouth with her hands, but she couldn't contain the sobs that shook her. "She's alive," she murmured through her tears. "My baby is alive." Valerie realized that she too was crying. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she held the photograph of a mother she had never truly known. A mother who had lived a completely different life before becoming the woman who had raised her. "Where is she?" Hope asked suddenly, grabbing Valerie's hand with a strength surprising for a woman her age. "Where is my Alexandra? Can I see her? Please, I need to see her." The question hit Valerie like a punch to the stomach. Her mother, her poor sick mother, who now spent most of her days lost in the fog of early-onset Alzheimer's, who sometimes couldn't remember her own daughter's name, who lived in a small, sad room in the Bronx because it was all Valerie could afford on her 2 jobs. Valerie began, but the words got stuck in her throat. How could she tell this elegant woman, this grandmother she had just discovered, that her daughter was sick, losing her memory, living in poverty? "What is it?" Hope asked, her voice filled with a new kind of panic. "Is she okay? Is she hurt?" "She is..." Valerie took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "She's sick. She has early-onset Alzheimer's. Sometimes she doesn't recognize me. She lives with me in a small apartment, and I work 2 jobs to pay for her medication and the rent." The silence that followed was so heavy, it seemed to have physical weight. Hope stood completely still, processing this new information. Her eyes filled with a new kind of pain. Not just the pain of loss, but the pain of knowing her daughter had suffered, had struggled, had needed help that she could have provided if only she had known where she was. 50 years, Hope repeated. But this time her voice was filled with bitterness. 50 years lost. 50 years I could have helped her, cared for her, known my granddaughter. She turned to Valerie with renewed intensity. "I want to see her, tonight, right now. Can you take me to her?" Valerie felt overwhelmed. Everything was happening too fast. An hour ago, she was just a waitress serving water to rich clients. Now, she was apparently the granddaughter of one of the most powerful women in America. And her entire life was a lie her mother had constructed to protect her from something she still didn't fully understand. I need time to process this," Valerie said, feeling the weight of 5 decades of family secrets falling on her shoulders. My mother is confused most of the time. I don't know how she would react to seeing you. I don't know if she would remember you. It doesn't matter if she doesn't remember me, Hope said with fervor. I remember her. I have remembered her every single day for 50 years. I have dreamed of this moment. Joaquin, the maitre d', finally approached discreetly, clearly concerned about the scene unfolding in his luxury establishment. Ladies, may I help you with anything? Do you need privacy? We have a private room. Yes, Hope said immediately, drying her tears with the napkin Valerie had offered. We need to talk privately. She turned to Valerie. Please give me a chance. Let me explain why your mother left, why I could never find her. There are so many things you need to know. Valerie looked around the elegant restaurant, at the curious faces pretending not to stare, at the world of luxury she had served in for years without ever dreaming she might belong to it. Then she looked at Hope, at this woman who claimed to be her grandmother, whose eyes held 50 years of pain and hope. Okay, she said finally. Let's talk. As Joaquin escorted them to the private room, Valerie realized her life had just split in two, before this moment and after. Before knowing she was the granddaughter of Hope Montgomery, and after. But what she didn't yet know was that the secrets she was about to uncover would change not only her understanding of the past, but her entire future. The private room at the Imperial Room was a study in discreet elegance. Cream-colored, silk-lined walls, a small polished mahogany table, and supple leather armchairs that probably cost more than Valerie's apartment. Once they were alone, with the door closed against the curious gazes of the main dining room, Hope seemed to age 10 years suddenly. She sank into one of the armchairs as if the weight of 5 decades had fallen on her all at once. Her hands, which had chaired corporate boards and signed million-dollar contracts, trembled slightly as she brought them to her lap. I don't know where to begin, she admitted, looking at Valerie with eyes that were a mixture of hope and terror. There is so much to explain. Valerie sat on the edge of the opposite armchair, still processing the surreality of the situation. Start at the beginning. Why did my mother leave? Hope closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength to revive memories she had spent decades trying to bury. In 1973, your mother was 22. She was brilliant, beautiful, full of life. She was studying art at NYU and had an extraordinary talent for painting. But she was also rebellious, independent. Nothing like what we expected from the daughter of a traditional family. She paused, her eyes fixed on a distant point, as if she could see the past projected on the opposite wall. She met a man, a painter named Michael Herrera. He was talented, passionate, but he came from a working-class family. His father was a mechanic. His mother cleaned houses. For my husband and me, at that time, she paused, ashamed. At that time, we were different, more closed-minded, more concerned with what society thought. Valerie felt a pang of pain. Michael Herrera, the father she had never known, whose name her mother sometimes mentioned when she thought no one was listening, always with a sad smile. What happened? She asked, though a part of her feared the answer. My husband Theodore forbade the relationship. He said he wouldn't allow his daughter to ruin her life by marrying beneath her status. He threatened to disinherit her if she didn't cut off the relationship immediately. Hope brought a hand to her forehead. I should have been stronger. I should have stood up to him. But in those days, wives didn't openly defy their husbands, especially in families like ours. But my mother didn't obey, Valerie guessed. No, she refused flatly. She said she loved Michael, that she would marry him with or without our approval. The argument was terrible. Things were said that should never have been said. Theodore yelled at her that if she married that man, she would be dead to him, that she would never be welcome in this family again. Tears began to run down Hope's cheeks again. That night, Alexandra packed her bags. She took only the essentials, clothes, some books, and the brooch I had given her for her 18th birthday. It was the only thing of value she had that was truly hers. She wrote me a letter. Hope opened her purse and took out a yellowish envelope, clearly reread thousands of times over 5 decades. I've kept it all these years, she murmured, extending the letter to Valerie with trembling hands. Valerie took the paper carefully, noticing how fragile it had become with time. The handwriting was unmistakably her mother's, though younger and more confident than the shaky script she knew from recent years. "Dear Mom," she began to read aloud. "By the time you read this, I'll be gone. I can't live in a family that values money and status more than their own daughter's happiness. I love Michael and he loves me. We will get married and build our own life, far from the hypocrisy and prejudice. Maybe someday you can find it in your heart to forgive the daughter who chose love over family expectations. I love you, but I can't be who you and Dad want me to be. Alexandra." Valerie finished reading in total silence. The letter trembled in her hands as she processed not just the words, but the understanding of how much courage it must have taken for her 22-year-old mother to leave behind everything she knew. "Did you look for her?" she finally asked. "Of course we looked," Hope replied bitterly. Theodore hired private detectives, used all his business contacts, offered rewards. But Alexandra had disappeared completely. It was as if she had vanished from the world. And Michael, what happened to him? Hope's face darkened even more. "Michael died in a construction accident when your mother was pregnant with you. A fall at a construction site where he was working nights to earn extra money. Your mother was left alone, without family, without resources, expecting a baby." Valerie felt as if she'd been punched in the stomach. Her father, the man her mother spoke of with such love, had died before she was born. Her mother had been completely alone, without the family that had rejected her, without the man she loved. "But we kept looking," Hope continued. "Especially after Theodore died 15 years ago. I hired more detectives, offered, but it was as if Alexandra had taken a completely new identity." "She did," Valerie murmured, finally understanding. "She took my father's last name, Herrera. She probably destroyed any document connecting her to the Montgomery name. She wanted to disappear, and she succeeded," Hope said with a mixture of admiration and pain. "For 50 years. She leaned forward, grabbing Valerie's hands with desperate intensity. "But now you are here. My granddaughter, my daughter's daughter. I may not have been able to find Alexandra, but you found me." Valerie felt overwhelmed by the intensity of the emotion in Hope's voice. This woman, this stranger who was her grandmother, was looking at her as if she were a miracle, a gift she had been waiting for half a century. "There are so many questions," Valerie said, her head spinning. "Why did my mother never tell me about you? Why did she tell me her family was dead? Probably to protect you, to keep you from growing up feeling rejected by a family you never knew. It was easier to say they were dead than to explain that they had chosen pride over love." Valerie thought about her childhood, all the times she had asked about grandparents, about relatives, about a wider family. Her mother had always changed the subject, made excuses, created a narrative of orphanhood that was now revealed as a protective lie. "And now what?" Valerie asked. "My mother is sick. Sometimes she doesn't recognize me. How do I explain to her that her mother, the woman she fled from 50 years ago, wants to see her?" "I don't know," Hope admitted. And for the first time since she had started speaking, her voice showed uncertainty. "I have to try. I've lost 50 years of her life. I can't lose what's left." She stood up suddenly, as if she had made a decision. "I want to help her. With the doctors, with the treatments, with everything she needs. Money can't buy back lost time, but it can ensure she gets the best care possible." "We don't need charity," Valerie answered automatically. The pride she had inherited from her mother surfaced instinctively. "It's not charity," Hope said firmly. "It's responsibility. It's love. It's everything I should have done 50 years ago if I hadn't been so stubborn and so blind." Valerie found herself studying the face of this woman who claimed to be her grandmother. She could see similarities, now that she knew what to look for. The shape of the eyes, the line of the jaw, a certain determined expression she sometimes saw in the mirror. "I need time," she said finally, "to process all this, to talk to my mother on one of her good days, to decide how to handle this." "Of course," Hope said, though Valerie could see the impatience in her eyes. "But please, don't take too long. At my age, at Alexandra's age, with her illness, time is the one thing we can't get back." Hope reached into her purse again, this time taking out an elegant business card and a gold pen. "This is my personal number," she said, writing on the back of the card. "Call me when you're ready. Day or night, it doesn't matter the hour. I've waited 50 years, but now that I know you're out there, that Alexandra is alive, every minute feels like an eternity. Valerie took the card, noting the quality of the paper, the weight of the gold pen, all the small luxuries that marked the difference between her world and Hope's. But more than that, she noticed the barely contained desperation in her newfound grandmother's eyes. "I understand," she murmured, putting the card in her pocket. "I promise I'll call you soon." Hope nodded, but before heading to the door, she paused and turned back to Valerie one more time. "One more thing," she said softly. "The brooch your mother has. Could you describe it exactly?" Valerie closed her eyes, visualizing the piece of jewelry she had seen so many times during her childhood, which her mother kept carefully in a small velvet box and only wore on very special occasions. It's oval, white gold. It has small blue sapphires that form something like a flower, and in the center there's a diamond. Not very big, but very bright. On the back, there's an inscription. What does the inscription say? Hope's voice had dropped to a hopeful whisper. "For my star may you always shine, Mom, 1969. Hope staggered slightly, as if the words had been a physical blow. She put a hand to her chest right over her heart. "It's the one," she murmured. "It's the same brooch. I gave it to her for her 18th birthday. It was the last thing I gave her before she left." The two women stood in silence for a moment, the weight of 5 decades of family separation filling the space between them. "Valerie," Hope said, and it was the first time she had used her name. "I want you to know something. For all these years, not a single day went by that I didn't think of her, that I didn't wonder if she was okay, if she was happy, if she'd had children, if she ever thought about the family she'd left behind. My mother did think about you," Valerie admitted softly. "Sometimes I'd find her crying for no reason. When I asked what was wrong, she always said nothing. She was just tired. But now I understand she was probably remembering. She talked about us. Not directly, but there were hints. Once, when I was very little, I asked why I didn't have grandparents like other kids. She got very sad and told me that sometimes families break, and they can't always be fixed. She said that sometimes loving someone means letting them go, even when it hurts too much." Hope had to sit down again, overwhelmed by the emotion. "She suffered too," she murmured. "It wasn't just us. She lost her family too." "I think everyone lost," Valerie said, with a wisdom that went beyond her 28 years. "You lost your daughter. My mother lost her family. I lost my grandparents. And my grandfather, he lost himself because he chose pride over love." The words hung in the air of the elegant private room, heavy with half a century of pain and regret. Finally, Hope stood up again, this time with more determination. "We can't get back the lost years," she said, her voice stronger now. "But we can decide what to do with the ones we have left. I want to know my daughter. I want to know you. I want to be the grandmother I should have been all these years." Valerie felt a complex mix of emotions: hope, fear, confusion, and something that might have been relief. The idea of not being alone in the world, of having family beyond her sick mother, was both terrifying and comforting. "I'm going to talk to her," she promised, on one of her good days. "I'm going to tell her I found you, that you want to see her. What if she doesn't want to see me?" The question came out, laden with a vulnerability that contrasted sharply with the image of the powerful businesswoman Hope usually projected. "Then we'll respect her decision," Valerie said, though the possibility saddened her deeply. "But I have a feeling that deep down, she's been waiting for this moment too." Hope nodded, drying her eyes with a silk handkerchief she'd taken from her purse. "There's one more thing you need to know," she said, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "I have a son, Richard. He's your uncle, though he has never known he had a sister. When Alexandra left, Theodore forbade us from mentioning her name in the house. Richard believes he's an only child. How will he react when he finds out?" Hope grimaced. "Not well, I'm afraid. Richard has grown up expecting to inherit the entire Montgomery empire. The appearance of Alexandra, and by extension you, will complicate those expectations." Valerie felt a new wave of anxiety. Not only did she have to deal with the discovery that she had a billionaire grandmother, but she also had an uncle who would likely see her as a threat to his inheritance. "I don't want trouble," she said quickly. I'm not looking for anything from you. I just want my mother to be okay." "I know, Valerie," Hope said gently, "but whether you like it or not, you are part of this family now. And in families like ours, that comes with complications." She headed for the door, but before opening it, she turned back one last time. "One last thing. Your job here at the restaurant. You like it?" Valerie flushed slightly. "It's honest work. It pays the bills. But you studied something else, didn't you? I can see it in your eyes, in the way you talk. You have an education." "Art history," Valerie admitted. "At NYU, like my mother. But after she got sick, I had to drop out to work full-time." Hope nodded, as if she had confirmed something she already suspected. "Things are going to change, Valerie. For you, for your mother, for all of us. I hope you're prepared." With that, she opened the door to the private room and disappeared into the main dining hall, leaving Valerie alone with the weight of 50 years of family secrets and the certainty that her life would never be the same. When Valerie finally left the private room, the restaurant had returned to its normal routine. The diners continued their conversations about business and vacations, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded just feet away. Sophia approached immediately, her face full of concern. "What happened in there? You left with that rich lady, and you looked like you'd seen a ghost." Valerie looked at her friend, wondering how to explain something she barely understood herself. I think I just found out I have a family I never knew about," she said finally. Sophia stared at her as if she'd lost her mind. "What do you mean, a family?" "It's a long story. I'll tell you after our shift." The rest of the night passed in a haze for Valerie. She served tables mechanically. She smiled when appropriate. She took orders and brought food, but her mind was completely elsewhere. Every time her hands touched a crystal glass, she thought of the one Hope had dropped. Every time she saw the sparkle of a customer's jewelry, she thought of her mother's brooch. When she finally finished her shift at 2 a.m., she was physically exhausted but mentally alert. The bus ride back to the Bronx gave her time to process the night's events, but the more she thought about it, the more surreal it all became. Her small apartment on the 4th floor of a walk-up building had never seemed so modest as it did that night. As she climbed the worn-out stairs, she thought about the difference between this world and the world of elegance she had just discovered she had roots in. She opened the door quietly, expecting to find her mother asleep. Instead, Alexandra was sitting in her favorite armchair by the window, looking out at the street with that distant expression that had been appearing more frequently lately. "Mom? Why are you awake?" Alexandra turned to her, and to Valerie's surprise, her eyes were clear and focused. It was one of her good days. "I couldn't sleep. I had the strangest feeling, as if something important was about to happen." Valerie stood frozen in the doorway. Was it possible that her mother, even in her state, had somehow sensed the night's encounter? "Something important? Like what?" Alexandra smiled, a sad, wise smile. "Like, it's time for you to know the truth about where you come from, my love." Valerie's heart sped up. "The truth?" "Sit down, Valerie. There are things I've kept for too long. Secrets I thought I would take to my grave. But tonight, I feel like it's the right time." Valerie sat slowly on the sofa across from her mother, unable to believe the coincidence. Or was it not a coincidence at all? "What do you want to talk about, Mom?" Alexandra got up with careful movements and headed to her bedroom. She returned a few moments later with a small velvet box that Valerie knew well, the box where she kept the brooch. "First," Alexandra said, "I want you to know that everything I told you about loving your father was true. Michael Herrera was the love of my life, and I married him for true love. Not for convenience or status," Valerie nodded, not knowing where the conversation was going. "But I didn't tell you the whole truth about my family," Alexandra continued. "They didn't die in an accident. I left them. I ran away from them because they didn't approve of my marriage." "Who were they, Mom?" Alexandra opened the box slowly, revealing the brooch that Valerie had seen thousands of times but never truly understood. "The Montgomerys," she said simply. "My father was Theodore Montgomery, owner of one of the largest textile companies in America. My mother was Hope de Mendoza, from an aristocratic New York family." Valerie felt as if the floor had opened up beneath her. Her mother knew. Somehow she knew what had happened tonight. How? She began to ask, but Alexandra interrupted her gently. This afternoon, while I was sleeping, I had the most vivid dream. I dreamed of my mother. She looked older, with silver hair, but it was her. She was telling me that she had found you, that she had been looking for me all these years. Tears began to run down Valerie's cheeks. It wasn't a dream, Mom. It was real. Tonight at the restaurant, I met Hope Montgomery. She's your mother. My grandmother. Alexandra closed her eyes, and a smile mixed with tears appeared on her face. I knew it, she murmured. In my heart, I knew it. After so many years, wondering if she ever thought of me, if she had forgiven me, if she was still alive. She has been looking for you, Valerie said, taking her mother's hands. For 50 years. She never stopped looking. And what did she say? Is she angry with me? Does she hate me for leaving? No, Valerie said firmly. She blames herself. She says she should have defended your right to choose your own life. She wants to see you, Mom. She wants to meet me. She wants to be part of our lives. Alexandra was silent for a long moment, processing this information she had been waiting for and dreading for half a century. Do you know what's saddest of all? She finally asked. That Dad Theodore died without knowing he had been a grandfather. Without knowing he had a beautiful, intelligent granddaughter he would have adored. But your mother is still alive, Valerie pointed out gently, and she wants to make up for lost time. Alexandra nodded slowly, taking the brooch from the box and holding it up to the lamplight. The sapphires glittered like little stars. This brooch, she said, was my great-grandmother's. It was supposed to be passed down from mother to daughter for generations. When I left, I took it with me, not because it was valuable, but because it was the only piece of my family history I had a right to take. And now you'll be able to give it back to the family, Valerie said. No, Alexandra said, holding the brooch out to her daughter. Now it belongs to you. You are the next generation, the next guardian of the family history. Valerie took the brooch with trembling hands. It was heavier than she had expected, and she could feel the weight of decades of family history in her palm. Are you sure you want to see your mother? After all this time? After everything that happened? I'm dying, Valerie, Alexandra said with a calmness that startled her daughter. My mind may be fading, but my heart still remembers. I don't want to leave this world without having made peace with the woman who gave me life. Don't talk like that, Valerie protested. But Alexandra smiled gently. It's the truth, my love. And that's why I want you to promise me something. When I'm gone, I want you to embrace the family you've just found. Don't make my mistakes. Don't let pride stop you from accepting the love they offer. Valerie held onto her mother's hands, feeling the fragility of her bones, the thinness of her skin. I promise. I'll call Grandma tomorrow, she said. We'll set up a meeting. Good, Alexandra said, leaning back in her armchair with an expression of peace Valerie hadn't seen in years. It's time this story had a different ending. As Valerie helped her mother to bed, she couldn't stop thinking about how a single night had changed everything. That morning, she had woken up as a waitress struggling to make ends meet. Now, she was going to sleep knowing she was the granddaughter of one of the richest families in America, and that her life was about to change forever. But as she fell asleep, holding her great-grandmother's brooch against her chest, she couldn't shake the feeling that the biggest changes were yet to come. The phone call that would change the course of 3 lives was made at 11 a.m. the next morning. Valerie, with trembling hands, dialed the number Hope had written on the back of her business card. Mrs. Montgomery? It's Valerie. I spoke with my mother last night. She wants to see you. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long that Valerie thought the connection had been lost. Finally, she heard Hope's broken voice. Really? Are you sure? She doesn't feel obligated because of what we discussed. It's not out of obligation, Valerie replied softly. She says she's been waiting for this moment for 50 years, but she was afraid to take the first step. 2 hours later, a caravan of black cars pulled up in front of the modest apartment building in the Bronx. Neighbors peeked out their windows, curious about the presence of such elegant vehicles in their working-class neighborhood. Hope got out of the first car with dignified but nervous movements. She wore a simple, light blue dress, very different from the formal suit of the night before. In her hands, she held a bouquet of white roses and a small box wrapped in gold paper. Valerie was waiting for her at the building's entrance, dressed in her best blouse and skirt. She had spent the morning obsessively cleaning the small apartment, even though she knew nothing could hide the difference between her world and Hope's. "How is she?" Hope asked as they climbed the stairs. "Lucid today?" Valerie replied. "She remembered a lot last night. She told me about you, about the house where she grew up, about how you used to go shopping for fabrics for her dresses." Hope paused on the third-floor landing, clinging to the railing. "What if she doesn't recognize me? What if I confuse her more?" "She recognized you in her dreams," Valerie said gently. "Her heart remembers you, even if her mind sometimes gets lost." When they reached the apartment door, Valerie opened it slowly. Alexandra was sitting in her armchair by the window, dressed in her best navy blue dress, the same color Hope had chosen. Her hair was carefully combed, and the sapphire brooch was pinned to her chest. Upon seeing her mother enter, Alexandra stood up with careful movements. The two women looked at each other across the small living room, 50 years of separation creating a chasm that seemed impossible to cross. Hope dropped the flowers and the box, bringing her hands to her mouth to stifle a sob. "Alexandra," she murmured. "My baby. My precious baby, Mom," Alexandra replied, and that simple word broke down all the barriers. Hope crossed the room and took her daughter in her arms, both of them crying with an intensity that made Valerie feel as if she were witnessing something sacred. They were tears of half a century of pain, of regret, of love that had never died. "I'm so sorry," Hope whispered against her daughter's hair. "I'm sorry I was so stubborn, so blind. I'm sorry I lost all these years." "I'm sorry too," Alexandra replied. "I'm sorry I ran away instead of fighting. I'm sorry I deprived you of knowing your granddaughter." They separated slightly, studying each other's faces, marked by time and pain. "You're sick?" Hope said, gently touching Alexandra's cheek. "Yes," Alexandra admitted. "My mind is fading, but today, with you here, I feel clearer than I have in years." Hope turned to Valerie, extending a hand to include her in the embrace. "And you," she said, "my precious granddaughter. You are so beautiful, so strong. Your mother raised you well." The first moments of the reunion were perfect, filled with happy tears and whispered confessions. But reality soon intruded when Hope's phone began to ring insistently. "Excuse me?" she murmured, looking at the screen. "It's Richard, my son. I have to answer." The conversation was brief but tense. Valerie could hear the man's raised voice on the other end of the line, though she couldn't make out the exact words. "I'm busy, Richard," Hope said firmly. "We'll talk at home." When she hung up, her expression had changed. The joy was still there, but now it was mixed with worry. "Trouble?" Alexandra asked, knowing her mother better than she had imagined. "Richard found out I came here. He's not happy." At that moment, as if summoned by the mention of his name, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed up the apartment stairs. Moments later, the apartment door burst open without a knock, and a middle-aged man, dressed in an expensive suit and wearing a furious expression, stormed in like a tornado. Richard Montgomery had his mother's eyes, but none of her warmth. His face was flushed with anger, and his movements were abrupt and aggressive. "What is the meaning of this?" he roared, looking alternately at Hope and the two women he didn't recognize. "Have you lost your mind, coming to this? This neighborhood alone? Richard?" Hope said in a warning tone. "Behave yourself. I want to introduce you to someone very important." "Important? Who in this place could possibly be important to our family?" Hope stood up straight, regaining her poise as a corporate matriarch. "Richard, this is Alexandra, your sister." The silence that followed was deafening. Richard looked at Alexandra as if she were a ghost, then at Valerie, then back at his mother. "That's impossible," he said finally, his voice dangerously low. "I don't have a sister." "Yes, you do," Hope replied firmly. "Alexandra left before you were born. Your father forbade her name from being mentioned, but she was always your older sister." Richard's face went through several colors before settling on a furious red. "And her? Who is she?" he asked, pointing at Valerie with a dismissive gesture. She is your niece. Alexandra's daughter. Your family. My family? Richard laughed bitterly. These gold diggers are my family. How much are they asking for, Mother? How much do they want to disappear? Valerie stood up, her own anger beginning to rise. No one is asking for anything. Your mother found us. Please, Richard scoffed. A poor waitress and her sick mother living in this hovel, and they coincidentally have connections to our family. It's the oldest scam in the book. Richard, that's enough, Hope ordered, but her son was beyond reason. No, Mother, you stop. You've lost your mind. These women have found some way to manipulate you. They probably researched our family history, found some loophole. The brooch, Alexandra interrupted suddenly, her voice clear and strong. She unfastened the jewel from her chest and held it out to Richard. Examine it. It's the one you gave Mom for her wedding anniversary in 1968. It's engraved with Dad's initials on the back. T.M. Theodore Montgomery. Richard took the brooch with trembling hands, turning it over to see the inscription. His face paled gradually as he examined the piece. This is impossible, he murmured. This brooch disappeared decades ago. Dad said it was lost. It wasn't lost, Alexandra said softly. I took it when I left. It was the only valuable thing that truly belonged to me. Richard looked from the jewel to Alexandra, his hostility warring with the irrefutable evidence in his hands. Even if this is real, he said, even if you are who you say you are, where have you been for 50 years? Why show up now, just as Mother is getting older, when decisions about the inheritance? Because I'm dying, Alexandra interrupted with brutal calm. I have early-onset Alzheimer's. In a few years, maybe months, I won't remember who I am. I wanted to make peace with my family before it's too late. The simplicity and honesty of the statement completely disarmed Richard. He stood there, holding the brooch, staring at the sister he never knew, who was slowly dying. And what about her? He asked, pointing to Valerie. What does she want from us? That her mother receives the best possible medical care, and that she finally has the family she always should have had. Mother, think rationally. If she is really your granddaughter, if this story is true, then she has legal rights, inheritance rights. Everything I've worked for, everything you've worked for, will still be yours. But now you will have to share, as it always should have been. Richard collapsed into a chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was discovering. His orderly world, where he was the sole heir to a business empire, had just exploded. I need time, he murmured. I need to process this. Of course, Hope said gently. But Richard, this is good news. It means our family won't end with you. It means there is a next generation. Richard looked at Valerie, truly seeing her for the first time. He saw the determination in her eyes, the way she had stood protectively by her mother, the dignity with which she had handled his accusations. You really don't want anything from us? He asked her directly. I just want my mother to be comfortable and well cared for during the time she has left, Valerie answered honestly. And maybe to have a bigger family than I've ever known. Richard nodded slowly, beginning to accept the new reality. The following months transformed everyone's lives. Alexandra was moved to the best neurology clinic in New York, where a team of specialists worked to slow the progress of her disease. Although there was no cure, the treatments gave her additional months of lucidity. Precious months she could spend getting to know the mother she had fled from, and being known by the brother she never had. Valerie left her job at the restaurant and re-enrolled at NYU to finish her art history degree. Hope insisted on paying not only the tuition, but also for a larger apartment where Alexandra could be comfortable when she left the clinic for family visits. The real gift, however, was not the material comforts, but the family. Sundays became family gathering days at the Montgomery mansion. Alexandra, on her good days, told stories of her youth that even surprised her mother. Richard gradually began to accept, and then to cherish, his newfound sister and niece. Do you know what's most ironic of all? Alexandra asked Hope one Sunday afternoon as they sat in the garden of the mansion where she had grown up. What, my love? That I ran away from all this to marry for love. And in the end, love is what brought us back together. The love of a granddaughter for her mother. The love of a mother for her lost daughter. The love that never truly died. Hope took her daughter's hand, feeling the fragility of her bones, the preciousness of the time they had left. I'm sorry we lost so many years. M.